The sun rises in the West. Vaccines don't cause autism. Donald Trump is a liar. These are constants of the universe. And we know that he surrounds himself with people who also lie repeatedly and with incredible fluency. Lying to get their way has always been their modus operandi because they think that their lies and their attempts to distort the truth will make it past the American people. Now, that obviously happens more frequently than we would like, but I think they continue to underestimate most of us at every turn because we we can tell most of the time when we're being lied to, especially when the lies are so incredible. And by incredible, I mean unbelievable, that only the most arrogant, practiced liar would think that they could be convincing somehow. This time around, the spin coming out of the Trump regime has gotten extraordinarily dark, and it's all in service to justifying their unjustifiable and illegal deportations of people who, most of whom, are here legally and have every right to be here. Now, this is a grasping at straws that is at once evil and quite pathetic. And this was never more apparent than at yesterday's White House press conference after failing to return yet again Kilmar Garcia, the Maryland resident, husband and father, who was illegally deported to El Salvador. Caroline Leavitt used manufactured evidence so egregious, so obviously made up out of whole cloth, that the fact that she could stand there and do that with a straight face and with such conviction should boggle our minds. Take a look.
Kilmar Garcia is an illegal alien, MS-13 gang member, and foreign terrorist who was deported back to his home country. And when Kilmar Garcia was originally arrested, he was wearing a sweatshirt with rolls of money covering the ears, mouth, and eyes of presidents on various currency denominations. This is a known MS-13 gang symbol of hear no evil, speak no evil, see no evil. Garcia was also arrested with two other well-known members of the vicious MS-13 gang. And two separate judges found that Garcia was a member of MS-13, and that finding has never been disputed. And just this morning, it was revealed through Maryland court documents that Garcia's wife petitioned for an order of protection against him for 2 instances of domestic violence in May of 2021. And here is the order right here. This is from a court in Maryland. So not only are Democrats rushing to defend an illegal criminal foreign terrorist gang member, but also an apparent woman beater.
You want to meet somebody who abuses, harasses, and rapes women? I know somebody you probably see every day. You could hang out with. Yeah. She lies with such conviction. She's so angry about this fictional character she's created, isn't she? None of what she says about Mr. Garcia is true. He was not and has never been and is not now a member of MS-13. Last I checked, he has no criminal record. And the fact that they are so desperate that they're dredging up these old documents of civil protective order against Garcia as proof that he is somehow a criminal deserving of deportation is telling, as far as I'm concerned. Now, before I explain what that's all about, can we just remind ourselves of something here? If you are accused of a crime in the United States of America, if it turns out you committed a crime in the United States of America, but you are here, regardless of how you got here, you are entitled to your habeas rights. You are entitled to due process. You are entitled to be represented in a court of law to face the charges against you. None of these things that this White House is making up about Garcia, with one exception, which I'm going to get to, should lead to his deportation, his illegal deportation, his having been disappeared. Because, at least until now, we had something called the rule of law. So, as you saw, Leavitt cites a civil protective order against Abrego Garcia. His wife is the person who originally filed that order. And she says that the Trump regime is purposefully misconstruing the reality of that order. In her statement to CNN, Jennifer Vasquez Sura, that's Garcia's wife, said she sought a civil protective order in 2021 after the couple had a disagreement. She did not appear at a court hearing, and the matter did not proceed. She said, quote, "Things did not escalate, and I decided not to follow through with the civil court process. We were able to work through this situation privately as a family, including by going to counseling. Our marriage only grew stronger in the years that followed. No one is perfect, and no marriage is perfect. That is not a justification for ICE's action of abducting him and deporting him to a country where he was supposed to be protected from deportation. Kilmar has always been a loving partner and father, and I will continue to stand by him and demand justice for him," unquote. Further, the claim that Abrego Garcia is in a gang has been instantly disputed. Watch legal reporter Roger Parloff on CNN.
What it really is double hearsay, as we would say. It's a detective who wasn't brought to court, never testified, saying what somebody allegedly told him, and that person is a confidential informant, and we don't know anything about him. So it's double hearsay as to him.
So a confidential informant says something to someone in this unit, and then it also comes down to the hat.
Yeah, so what the only thing that the detective observed himself was he was wearing a Chicago Bulls hat and some sort of hoodie. The hoodie had some sort of insignia that one of the officers called indicative of Hispanic gang culture, not even a particular gang. And so it all came down to the detective also said he spoke to some confidential informant who had been reliable in the past, and that person identified him as a high-ranking member of MS-13, a clique called the Westerns.
Right, which when you looked into it in the government, says Westerns don't even operate really in that state.
That's right. They're in Brentwood, Long Island, and he's never lived in New York.
Okay, so we are allowing to be empowered the pettiest of men who look at a brown person wearing a hoodie with an insignia and decide that they just don't like that person, so that person must be part of some violent gang. These are our new brown shirts. This is the Gestapo. Doesn't matter if it's true or not. It matters what somebody in power, even if they have only a small amount of power, it only matters what that person decides to believe about you. And of course, if said person exists within a system that is controlled by the most racist, bigoted, cruel people among us, well, then guess what? Such people will get more power and will have more opportunities to malign people like Abrego Garcia, which clearly is going to lead to more people being illegally detained and disappeared. That's where we are right now. Right? Before I move on, I'm one thing I'm curious about is why is nobody suing these people for defamation? How are they able time and time again, without any pushback by the so-called White House press corps, to spout these absolutely debunked, defamatory lies about a man who is not here to defend himself? Why? Because he was kidnapped and sent to a notorious, hardcore prison that is full of people who would be more than happy to torture and kill him, which is why a judge said years ago, Abrego Garcia should never, ever, ever be sent back to El Salvador, the country he escaped from. So this, of course, is not the only manipulation the Trump regime is engaging in. This is hard, so I'm just going to warn you ahead of time. The mother of Rachel Morin, a woman who was killed by an undocumented immigrant in 2023, appeared with Leavitt at the presser. Leavitt used this woman as a pawn, comparing Abrego Garcia to the man who committed the horrific acts against her daughter. Abrego Garcia has no history of violence and is considered, including by his wife, to be a loving husband and father. But if the Trump regime can lie repeatedly, and not just repeatedly, but can lie in ways that escalate day after day after day. Remember, we started out with an administrative error. Now, Abrego Garcia, allegedly, according to the mendacious Trump regime, is a terrorist and a lead gang member of a gang that didn't even exist anywhere near where he lived. So if they can turn a Maryland resident, husband and father, who, as far as I'm aware, has done everything he's needed to do in order to stay in this country legally, into a violent criminal gang member and deny him due process while they're at it and disappear him to a foreign country where he is undoubtedly doing hard labor and suffering unimaginable conditions, they can do this to anybody, including you and including me. Because if one person in this country is denied due process does not exist in any meaningful way. The regime's goal is to put away anybody they deem deportable. Now, of course, this is coming at a high price tag, but since you and I are paying for it, what do they care? The U.S. State Department is paying El Salvador $6 million to jail hundreds of people deported from the United States to CICOT, that notorious gulag where Abrego Garcia is also being held. But in United States law, the Leahy law bars the department's financial support of, quote, units of foreign security forces, unquote, which can include military and law enforcement staff in prisons facing credible allegations of gross human rights violations. Senator Chris Van Hollen, a Democrat from Maryland, which again is where Abrego Garcia lived with his family, recently went to El Salvador to try to visit Abrego Garcia and confirm these human rights violations. Charles Baja, a former State Department official for 32 years, said to the Baltimore Sun, quote, CICOT is a facility that exposes prisoners to torture and cruel, degrading, and inhumane treatment and punishment. Under the Leahy law, this should disqualify CICOT from receiving U.S. assistance, unquote. So not only is Donald illegally deporting American residents, he's illegally paying the El Salvadorian prison to torture them and hold them in conditions that we know to be inhumane. Now, my question, yes, that's thrilling that there's a law to prevent such things. My question is, why would El Salvador be getting any money to house American prisoners? Are they, quote unquote, American? No. They weren't born here. Not that that's going to matter. But almost all of them were here legally. So there was literally no reason for them to be sent away from this country in the first place. So why should we be giving El Salvador any money at all? I have a theory. It's quid pro quo. Donald knows that President Bukele of El Salvador, the self-styled world's coolest dictator, is a small man running a relatively small, unimportant, in the grand scheme of things, country. And Donald needs all of the allies he can get $6 million, that's a pretty small price to pay to carry out your agenda, if indeed your agenda is to keep Americans terrified. Oh, and to, be really cruel in the process. Our Democratic leaders recognize the horrors and are speaking out. And Abrego Garcia isn't the only case in which the Trump regime is distorting the facts. Mahmoud Khalil is facing major character assassination as well, against evidence that any person with the slightest bit of media literacy would be discounting. Before I get into that, though, please like and share this video. Independent media like ours needs you guys more than ever. The Trump regime distorts the truth on a daily basis. And we are here. One of the sole purposes for our being here is to continue to call it out at no matter what cost. Because trust me, this isn't easy for any of us. So if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do. That helps us tremendously. We're almost at 400,000 subscribers, and every click we get, every subscriber we get, every like and share we get, helps us fight back against the tyranny, disinformation, and propaganda. The case against Mahmoud Khalil, who's a U.S. resident detained by ICE for his participation in pro-Gaza protests at Columbia University, is now being targeted by false and flimsy so-called evidence by the Trump regime. The Department of Homeland Security submitted over 100 pages of what they refer to as evidence against Khalil, including tabloid articles from right-wing outlets like the Rupert Murdoch-owned New York Post, in order to support claims that Khalil lied on his green card application by hiding affiliations with pro-Palestinian groups and parts of his employment history. NBC News investigative reporter Chloe Adkins reviewed all of this evidence and had this to say.
We all know about Secretary of State Marco Rubio's memo that said that his activities were anti-Semitic and that his presence in the U.S. is a threat to foreign policy. But in the new evidence that I reviewed, it looks at the second ground of removal, which is that he allegedly omitted certain work experience from his permanent residency application. So in doing so, they relied on heavily unverified tabloid articles and a super shaky timeline. So in one instance, they looked at several articles from the New York Post that said he held a certain title at a nonprofit, when in fact he was actually an intern and received student credit, or class credit, I should say, with Columbia University, which was included in his application to the government. And in another instance, we've really seen the government hone in that he didn't include his being involved in the protest movements on Columbia University in his permanent residency application, when in fact those tabloid articles that they're relying on were published in April 2024, which was a month after he filed his application with the government.
Unverified, shaky tabloids. That's their evidence. That is the United States government, one of the most powerful entities in human history, is relying on tabloids to make a case against one man with no power. Last week, immigration judge Jamie Comins, did not rule that Khalil lied on his green card application. His lawyers slammed the DHS for relying on tabloid sources instead of an independent investigation, which, again, I'm pretty sure the Department of Homeland Security has all of the resources at its disposal in order to do. They could probably even enlist the help of the Department of Justice, who, last I checked, has massive numbers of attorneys willing to do its bidding, although thankfully there are still quite a few who are not willing to do their bidding. But again, this is not about evidence. This is not about making a case that could stand up in court. This is about manufacturing a case for the American people, to get the American people used to the idea that in certain instances, it's okay. It's okay if we strip people from their rights because they're the wrong kind of people. They're the kind of people we don't want here, right? They're the wrong color. They come from the wrong country. They espouse the wrong beliefs. And if their beliefs maybe aren't that wrong, if you actually take a second to understand them, well, then we'll just make it up. And we'll pretend that these people are connected to organizations that nobody could possibly support. And that might make enough people feel well enough, feel good enough, feel safe enough to be okay with the fact that civil liberties in this country are being eradicated because they are going to continue to delude themselves that that won't apply to them. But of course it will ultimately, because it always does. So why are we here? We're here to make sure that that doesn't happen. We're here because we're the only people who can hold Donald Trump and his regime accountable in a way that hopefully is going to matter. And part of that is by just making it clear to everybody that their spin is just that their facts are manufactured fantasies, that their telling of the tale is disinformation and propaganda with the purpose not of informing the American people, not of keeping us apprised of what's really going on, but of getting their way, but of making it easier for them to continue policies that are so cruel, that are so abjectly inhumane, that ultimately they will lead to the complete and utter dismantling of the rule of law in America. Not just for Mahmoud Khalil, not just for Abrego Garcia, but for you, for me, and anybody paying attention, and a lot of people who aren't. So Democrats are fighting back against these illegal moves, while Senator Van Hollen visited El Salvador in an attempt to check on Abrego Garcia's well-being. And by well-being, what we want proof of life. Is this man still alive? If he's alive, is he still conscious? Is he intact? Other House members who were Democrats are also working to get down to El Salvador. They refuse to back down and let Abrego Garcia rot in that El Salvadoran jail. Hillary Clinton tweeted the following, quote, "If they can ship Kilmar Abrego Garcia to a foreign prison, accused of no crime, with no trial, they can do it to anyone. Americans of conscience must stand against this now," unquote. That is perfectly said by Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. Americans must stand together now. And she knows whereof she speaks, because Donald Trump has been calling for her to be jailed for a decade now. People like Hillary Clinton have targets on their backs. They know better than anybody that due process isn't going to apply to them any more than it's going to apply to Kilmar Garcia or Mahmoud Khalil. They know this because I think it's pretty obvious by now that the agenda of the Trump regime isn't simply to get rid of brown people they don't want here anymore. It's to get rid of anybody who stands up against them, anybody who tells the truth, anybody who understands that Donald Trump, in addition to being a pathetic excuse for a human being, is so unfit to serve this country. There aren't words to describe it. Now, I know this is grim stuff, but think of it this way. There are thousands of legal professionals fighting every day for immigrants in our country. There are people fighting with everything they have for the individuals who have been illegally detained and disappeared from our country. We can make an impact here. If you are looking to, please consider supporting or donating to organizations like the National Immigration Law Center, because they are fighting for immigrants in this country. They are fighting for those who don't have a voice in Donald's fascist regime, including providing things like legal support and guides like this one to help immigrants facing illegal deportation. Again, I cannot emphasize enough just how important that we all stand together against the onslaughts of the Trump regime, the onslaughts to our autonomy, the onslaughts to our ability to assemble peacefully, to exercise our First Amendment rights, to engage in free thought, to learn the way we want to learn, and to be free, to be the kind of people we thought we were. People with civil rights, people who were allowed to engage in the franchise, people who could speak their minds without fear of repercussions, without fear of reprisal from the government. Because what's happening now is utterly antithetical to who we thought we were supposed to be. So keep that in mind. And also keep in mind that one of the most essential parts of that project, undoing the damage that has been done so far, is to keep telling the truth, to stay in the fight, and please, please, as hard as it is, don't lose hope. Please take a second and like and share this video. It'd be awesome if you could subscribe to the channel. If you're listening to us in podcast form, please follow us and give the show a 5-star rating, because it really does help other people find our content. Thanks.